material to pack in, and Q&A to get through, and resources to provide you with. These Excel classes have been extremely popular, not just in terms of registration, but in terms of the feedback we've received. We're really proud to be able to offer such a valuable resource to the CPA community, and this particular class today is the first one that we have offered. This is a new topic that we're offering on our site today. So you're fortunate to have grabbed a seat. The classes did close pretty early. I just opened up a few more seats today, but not many. I think we have 1,300 people that are registered for this session. And I just want to mention that we did provide you with an attachment that you can download. Some people prefer to use the attachments and follow along on their, as Dennis was going through the content. Others may benefit from simply watching, being a bit more passive, and then going back and revisiting it. My personal recommendation would be to do the latter. I think it's difficult to try to follow along doing the steps while focusing on the presentation. So that's just my 2 cents. But we did make the handout materials available. It's a PowerPoint with an extra link in there. And you can go back to the emails that were sent as part of the registration process or log into your account, and you will be able to find all of that. So, Dennis, it looks like all is well in your world. Are you want to do a quick mic check?
Yes, I hope you can hear me well, and hope everybody else can too.
Yeah, it's coming through clearly as far as I could tell. And I just want to mention that we're going to send you a note in just a second through the chat bar with some administrative information about today's class, as well as a link to the handout materials. But where I am, and actually, Dennis, we're both in Colorado. That's
yes.
a rarity. Yesterday I had that too, another Colorado presenter, Golden actually. But it doesn't happen every week or every day, certainly, and it's always nice to be in the same time zone as one of our. So why don't we go ahead and kick things off, since it is 12 o'clock in our world here. First of all, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Scott Zarrett. I'm the president of CPAacademy.org, and today's class is going to be taught by Dennis Taylor, and this is a class that is new to our platform, and it's an hour in length. It does qualify for 1 CPE credit. We do have polling questions that we're going to ask at intermittent times throughout the presentation. As a matter of fact, probably wouldn't hurt me to go ahead and launch one now. This is the type of session where I'd really rather get these out of the way and focus more of our time on the presentation itself. So how much of your day do you use Excel? Here is a chance for you to tell us a little bit about your own user experiences. And we could see those responses coming in nicely. I just want to, again, I want to mention that we are recording today's presentation. I want to mention that Dennis is going to leave time at the end for a Q&A. Just keep in mind that with as many people as we have registered and as many questions as we get, some small questions, meaning very detailed, and others bigger picture, it's very difficult to get to everyone's questions when we have a full house like this, but we will leave time at the end for Q&A. We have 85% of you who responded to this poll. I know that for this session in particular, there are less people that are relying on CPE, but we still ask you to fill out the polls just so we can keep track of overall participation. So let me go ahead and close this down, and with that said, let's turn the presentation over to Dennis Taylor.
All right, thank you, Scott, and hello, everyone. Anybody who's been working with Excel for any amount of time begins to realize there's some shortcuts here, some keystroke shortcuts. There are some techniques that maybe you didn't learn in day 1 of Excel and never learned, and a lot of people pick up Excel sort of on the fly. In today's session, we're going to be giving you a lot of tips, and a lot of them will have day-to-day relevance. You will be a more proficient user by the end of this session if you remember or have written down some of the tips I'm going to be showing you. In this particular workbook that I'll be using most of the time here, imagine it was sent to you. What's the first thing you do after opening it? You probably start clicking on the Sheet tabs. Not a bad idea. You want to know what's in this. First of all, do recognize, I wanted to say at the beginning here too, I am using Excel 2013. And nearly everything we do will work in prior versions. I will point out differences when they occur. Some of the shortcuts, there are a few new ones in Excel 2013, but most of them have been around for a while, and some of them, 15, 20 years, are just not that well known. When you do open a workbook, it's not uncommon to want to know which worksheets are in it, and maybe you've seen this before, it's been a long time. or maybe it's brand new to you. But in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see what are called navigation arrows. Excel 2013 has only 2 of them. If you're using older versions, you'll see 4. But in either case, if you right-click in that lower left corner, if you right-click, you will get a list of worksheet names. Now, a little bit different. Excel 2013 is better. You get a scrollable list. At most, you can see 20 names at once. If you have more than 20 worksheets, there's a active scroll bar. You can scroll up and down. And the top-down order of these does correspond with the left to right order that we see at the bottom of the screen. And so imagine if this is a workbook that maybe you haven't seen about 5 months or so, and you open it and say, oh yeah, I remember this workbook. I remember that AutoSum sheet there. I want to go there. Double-click it, and you open that sheet. And meanwhile, the display at the bottom of the screen has changed. Now, seeing this many sheets isn't very much, and this is a little bit atypical. But in Excel 2013, you've got 3 dots right here at the bottom of the screen. If you click and drag those dots rightward, you are expanding the list of sheet names. Now, if you happen to double-click it, that's considered the so-called default location. If you're using Excel 2010, you'll have to point right where the sheet names end and the scroll bar begins, and there you'll see a 2-way arrow, and you can click and drag that as well. But the point is, why not even drag this farther? Now, if we're looking at the last few sheets on the workbook, maybe this isn't making my point that strongly, but how do we go back to the very first sheet? Or how do we show, better yet, how do we show the first few sheet names? We click the leftmost arrow here with the Control key. Now here too, a little bit different. In Excel 2010, you want to do a click on the leftmost of the 4 arrows. Excel 2013, Control-click the left arrow. So there are the first few sheet names. We can't see all the sheet names here. Possibly we could shorten some of them, but that's not really the goal. You want your sheet names to be intelligent, sensible, and, if not tell you exactly what's in them, you can't always do that, at least make them meaningful. They can be up to 31 characters. But off to the right here, where you either see the 3 dots, or in older versions you see the split point between sheet names and scroll bar, you can click and drag this even farther to the right. Now, of course, you are shrinking the scroll bar, but it's still functional. And regardless of how wide the worksheet is, this little sliding bar within the scroll bar is functional and workable. So you'll just experiment with that a little bit. I think a lot of times it's just handy to see more sheet names. Now, I'm going to go back to the first sheet. It's called HR List. We'll probably be using this a few times. Imagine somebody's looking over my shoulder, and I want this data to, in the good sense. They want to see the information more clearly. I want to zoom in. Hold down Control, use the mouse wheel. It doesn't make any difference where the mouse is, and we don't care what the zoom percent is usually, but in the lower right-hand corner you do see that. And a lot of you are probably familiar with the slider bar in the lower right-hand corner. The problem with that is at times you've got to get the mouse right on that slider indicator to drag it. Nothing wrong with that, but on the other hand, anytime you want to zoom in, Control and mouse wheel, it's going to be a lot faster. Nobody's really counting or cares, but each little click of the mouse there, by the way, changes the display by 15%. In the lower right-hand corner, you can click the plus or the minus on either end of the slider bar to change the zoom by 10%. But like I said, most of the time we don't care too much about the actual percent. But it's really handy. I probably use it more than most people because I'm often doing live sessions and webinars, and I want things to be large and clear on the screen. And particularly when we're working with complex formulas, we want to be sure we're seeing periods and commas clearly, and parentheses are not blurring together and that sort of thing. So zooming in and out is something we'll do frequently here. Something else too, when we're switching worksheets, again, it's more likely that we're going to click on them. But if you've got a workbook where every sheet is a different month, say January, February, March, etc., when you're on the February sheet, you don't have to stop and think that March is next. And sometimes your hands are on the keyboard, and we have that annoyance, that slight annoyance at times. Oh, you've got to reach for the mouse now. But Control Page Down will move this one sheet to the right, as I'm doing right now. Control Page Down. This is just moving this one sheet rightward. So that'll be handy at times. Sure enough, Control Page Up, one sheet leftward. If you hold down the two together, if I hold down Control Page Up, within a second or two I'll be viewing page 1. In the reverse, if I hold down Control and Page Down for a second or two, I'll be eventually looking at the very last sheet. There it is there, and so on. So you can get used to that, and whether by keystroke or by mouse. Keep in mind, Excel was designed back in 1986 for the very first version, was, believe it or not, for the Mac. And at that time, the whole idea of the mouse wasn't for certain, and so most navigation techniques, in fact, a lot of techniques were available on both mouse and keyboard because I wasn't sure whether we'd be using a mouse. And then solitaire happened, and so we're using a mouse a lot of us. Now, on a given worksheet, sometimes, particularly if it's a wide one like this, this next one over, this is scientific data. Don't ask me what it means, really. I don't have a clue. But if you want to move across the screen relatively fast, you can certainly scroll, but on the other hand, Alt page down will move you across the screen, one screen at a time. That's Alt page down, or Alt page up leftward. So I tend not to use that myself a lot, but you might, depending upon whether you use really, really wide worksheets at times, that sort of thing. Now, within a given worksheet, suppose this was sent to you and you've never seen it before, and you don't even know the company, you don't have a rough idea how big it is. You're likely to scroll up and down to get to the bottom of it. But it's a good idea in almost any worksheet at certain times to say, I want to know how big this worksheet is. Not in terms of how many bits and bytes, but how far down does it go? How many rows? How many columns? And again, we're not writing this down, or we don't care that much, but we do have a rough idea. If you press Control End, and that's the END key, not the letter N, Control End moves the active cell to the lower right-hand corner of what might be called the active part of the worksheet. And very often, in the current case it's true, that's an empty cell. So what does that mean? It went to cell AH742. You can say, and say with authority, there is no data anywhere in this worksheet below row 742, and there's no data to the right of column AH. You can be sure of that. Often there is data in that row. We'll scroll off to the left, and there it is, row 742. There's probably data above it up in the AH way at the top. For the moment, let's say we don't care. But we know for sure there will not be any unhappy surprises later when we discover some data down in row 800 or 12,000 or something like that. That's not the case here. We know there's no data below row 742. A slight adjustment here occasionally is necessary. In some worksheets you might do this, and then you start looking around, you realize there's really no data above that point. So here's what could have happened, something just innocuous like this. I'm on the phone, somebody gives me a call and gives me a code number or something. I don't have a pencil handy or whatever, so I just type it in right here. And later I use that, and then I get rid of this. At a later time, a few minutes later, or hours, or maybe even a few days later, I just happen to hit Control End. What happens? It goes down to here. In other words, Excel remembers where you put data. Now, most of the time, it's not too far off. If you find that annoying, what you want to do, just delete the truly unnecessary rows. Click and delete those. And sure enough, you might think it's going to work now. It still doesn't work, but save the workbook, and then from there on in, it's going to be accurate. Most of the time, we don't worry about that too much. Now, going back to the upper left-hand corner, the opposite of Control End, you could say, Control Home. And those of you who work with Word know that Control Home always takes you to the beginning of a document. Control End takes you to the end. So a similar meaning here in Excel. Same thing in PowerPoint too. Control Home will always take you to cell A1 unless you have frozen titles in effect. And so that'll happen sometimes. But that's handy too, because often as we're scoping out a worksheet or looking at it, if the active cell happens to be somewhere else, we often want to return to the upper left-hand corner. It's going to be Control Home. Now, when you're working within data too, you might be making some changes here and there. Maybe you have to add a new record, or something occurs to you the need to do that. You might want to do it at the bottom. When you double-click the bottom edge of the active cell moves downward until there's a break in the data. So I'm about to double-click the bottom edge of this. When you point to the bottom edge, the pointer arrow is accompanied by another four-way arrow. Double-click. We're at the bottom. This actually works in all four directions. Maybe I've made some changes down here and pretty much finished. I want to zip back up to the top of the column, click on a cell, double-click the top edge, and we're up to the top. You can do this from the keyboard. It's Control down arrow or Control up arrow or Control, as I said earlier, in both directions, left or right as well too. This will not work so smoothly in column I because there are all kinds of empty cells, and based on the heading you can see why. But if we're looking at the data in here somewhere, and for example, if I'm right here and if I double-click the bottom edge or Control down arrow, it's not going to go very far. So we'll see what's happening there. But both of those are handy for just moving around a worksheet. There's a keystroke method, that's control down arrow, and the mouse method by double-clicking the edge. Now, I have a different workbook open. It has nothing in it for the moment, but it's not uncommon to have multiple workbooks open. And on the View tab in the ribbon, off to the right, you've got a Switch Windows button. Now, this is a good candidate for what you can do with, and it's representative of what we can do with any button in the ribbon menu system. The View tab in the ribbon is one of many. Now, what if I'm working on the Home tab, where a lot of us spend a good deal of time because we do a lot of formatting changes and a lot of familiar choices out here. If I want to switch workbooks, I've got to go to the View tab to do this. So why not take this button and right-click it and put it in your Quick Access toolbar? I've already done this, so I don't have to do it. But if I'm on the Home tab or any other tab but View, and I want to switch workbooks, here's that button right there, and there's the other workbook. But even faster is a keystroke shortcut, Ctrl Tab. There it is, Ctrl Tab. If you have only 2 files open, it's a toggle back and forth. If you have 3, 4, or 5 files, Ctrl Tab will take you to the next file, next file, next file, eventually back to the current one. And then if you press Ctrl Shift Tab, it goes in the opposite direction. So Ctrl Tab is a good way to switch workbooks. If you want that occasional view of which workbooks are open, copy from the View tab by right-clicking on Switch Windows, copy this, and the choice here, by the way, says Add to Quick Access Toolbar. Add that to your Quick Access Toolbar. I had done it previously, so there it is. So at any time, if I want to remind myself what's open, which the files are open, I can click this and see the list of files. For me, it's not uncommon to have 4 or 5 files open. It might be for you too, but that's a nice handy way to get back and forth there. Now, there could be times too when you're looking at data and maybe it's just you and you're analyzing this and analyzing that. I can see about a little bit more than 20, I can see almost row 27 here, not quite all of it for the moment. I don't need the commands for a while. I want to be scrolling up and down, making some changes. So I'll press Ctrl F1. And that collapses the ribbon so that it only contains tabs. Now I'm seeing a little bit of row 30 down there instead of just row 27, so I see more on the screen. And I'll press Ctrl F1 again to bring it back. You can also collapse the ribbon by double-clicking the current active tab. So View is active, I'll double-click it, and it collapses the ribbon. Now, sometimes you want to go full screen, and there used to be, and there still is in Excel 2010, a button out here that says full screen. In Excel 2013, we don't see this, and so it's Control Shift F1, and that gets rid of not only the ribbon, but the entire ribbon and the tabs with it. I'm now seeing part of row 32. Previous example was 30, and before that it was 27. So there are times you don't necessarily have to use both of those, but if you simply want full screen or to return from full screen, Control Shift F1. Now that's new in Excel 2013. It does not work in Excel 2010. Control F1 does. In addition to this too, if you go off to in the Excel 2013 only, in the upper right corner of your screen there is a question mark there, and it says Ribbon Display Options. Click that and you'll see other methods here. They don't remind you that there are keystroke shortcuts for doing this, but you can auto-hide the ribbon, show just the tabs, or show tabs and command. So you've got some good quick control here over your display. And what if you were about to print this? It's always recommended you get a print preview. A new keystroke shortcut introduced in Excel 2007, not so widely known, is Ctrl F2, print preview. And you can just look at it and get a rough idea whether you're on the right track or not. And sometimes you look at the bottom right away and say, oh, it's going to be 52 pages. I better make some changes here. So you'll make some other changes and possibly. Maybe it's just a quick look to remind yourself what you're about to print and so on. Fine, escape, you're right back into Excel. So Control F2 is really handy as a print preview there. What if we want a new worksheet? Maybe we're going to be copying some of this data to a different worksheet. I want a new worksheet right nearby here. I'll simply press Shift F11. Bottom of the screen, there's now a new sheet. It's going to be called Sheet 1, 2, 3, 4, something like that, depending on what else you've got. So I was on the HR sheet, I pressed Shift F11, and immediately here's a new sheet to the left. You can do that at any time. Recognize that in Excel 2013, there is a new button way off to the right. It's got a plus in it with a circle. that will give you a new sheet to the right of the current sheet, whereas Shift F11 gives you a new sheet to the left. So if I press the plus here, I'm about to see a new sheet at the bottom. It's going to be to the right of HR list, and it's probably going to be called Sheet 5. There we are, so that happens too. Now, as it turns out, I don't need those. Can I undo that action? No. Undo is a great feature, but it cannot work with sheet-type actions, so we'll just have to click and delete this, because I don't want that. I might want the other one, so I'll keep it. And there was no warning on that, by the way, since there was no data in it whatsoever. Now, if you want a whole new workbook, it's Ctrl N, and here we do mean the letter N, no Shift key involved. Ctrl N, create a brand new workbook in our current session here. So there's a book 2. Now I've got 3 workbooks open. Ctrl Tab takes me to this one. Ctrl Tab might take me back to that one. Sometimes you have to press Ctrl Shift Tab to get to all 3 of them. There we go. And I probably don't need that workbook, but I'll leave it open. But how do I close that workbook? Maybe that was unnecessary. So I'll go back to this workbook. I don't want it anymore. You can close a workbook with Ctrl W. I'm not sure what how you're supposed to remember that. Withdraw, wimp out, or I don't know, what else might you say? But that closes a workbook. If there had been any data in there, there would have been a prompt about saving it. Now, everybody knows how to copy and paste, probably. Once you've been through a few sessions of Excel, you learn pretty easily. And I've got some data out here I might want to make copies of. But there certainly are some shortcuts. And let's say we always begin with the idea that you can't use body English to move the data. You have to select it first. So we're going to select this data right here. By the way, a slight shortcut, but not really a major one with a small list. If you click inside of a list that's surrounded by empty cells and worksheet boundaries, you can press Control A, but it's hardly worth it there. But nevertheless, that's okay. If we want to move this, what do? We drag any edge. Now, often that's going to be the fastest, unless you got to drag it 800 rows or whatever, something like that, thousands of rows, then it's not so fast. And so the standard cut and paste, and a lot of people will use Control C and then Control X, is probably going to be more efficient. But many, many times when you're moving data, if it's within the same screen or not too far away, just dragging an edge is probably going to make sense. So, and again, some of the concern might be if we had formulas here. I want to put in some formulas here, and a quick way to get in all the totals here is simply to press Alt equal. That's a shortcut for AutoSum. Now, I did that a little bit slowly, and it still works, but you want to be a little bit careful with any shortcut that uses Alt. Because when you hold down Alt for a second, what happens is numbers and letters appear at the top of your screen. Let me do that again. I'm holding down Alt. I don't necessarily all that, but there are potential shortcuts in the menu system, the ribbon menu system. If maybe the mouse doesn't work, that could be one rationale. Or maybe discover a quick combination. So, for example, right now, the Formulas tab could be activated if I press the letter M. If I wanted to, for example, show formulas, I could press H or formula auditing. You see the letters associated with each of these.
Dennis, I just wanted to...
If we have time, we'll show you one example of how to do that later.
Dennis, we're having a little bit of trouble with the audio. It got choppy. I think it's a function of voice over IP. Is there any chance that I might be able to call you on a direct line, or is there anything you might be able to do on your side?
I could call in with a different number. I could switch to a headset.
It's a quick thing to do. It might not be a bad idea, but maybe dialing in.
Okay, I could dial in.
Yeah, let's try that. And what I'll do in the meantime, I'm going to go through a couple of polls. I'm only concerned it may get worse before it gets better. And
I need a phone number.
Oh, okay. It's on the side panel up the top. If you click on telephone, it'll provide that for you. You see that? Actually, Dennis, why don't you just shoot me your phone number through the chat bar, and I'll just give you a call. That'll be the quick thing. And as far as the poll goes, we have 61% of you who have responded. Try to get it up to about 95%. All right, we'll give Dennis a moment to call in. Every once in a while we'll have that issue. I'm going to go ahead and launch another poll. Not a bad use of time right now. These are inevitable. We do have to ask the polls. And I have been involved in other Excel classes enough to know the answers to this question. And it doesn't look like most of you would be surprised by this, but there are, as far as I understand, over 450 Excel functions. I don't think we're going to get to the majority of them today. But we'll get to some. And Dennis, it looks like he was on and now he's off. Dennis, you there? All right, we'll get a hold on this. And that's 90%. That's what we had as the answer. Again, the answer was over 450. And hopefully we'll have Dennis on the line here shortly. All right, Dennis, let's do another quick sound check there.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. I'm sorry for the disruption, but yeah, you're fine and your PowerPoints are back. So thanks for that. We took care of 2 polls, and second one was regarding the number of Excel functions that are out there at over 450. So now we've at least gotten our polling requirements out of the way, but still have 1 or 2 more left.
Are you hearing static? I'm hearing some.
No, I'm okay.
Okay, fine, good. All right, let's continue. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we're in good shape. Thank you.
Okay. If you have formulas and you move data with formulas, the formulas, of course, adjust. You could say that it looks like we're just moving the data, but the formulas that had been up here, I didn't point them out, but as we look at these here, these are now dealing with these rows where, of course, up above they're dealing with rows 2 through 7. Now, sometimes you want to copy data. Let me undo this with Ctrl Z, and that's certainly a fast way for undo. A lot of you know that up in the Quick Access Toolbar, you have an undo button. By the way, there is a drop arrow associated with that where you can undo recent actions too, up to 100. What if we want to copy data? I want to make a copy of this. I want to experiment with the numbers possibly. I can drag any edge with the Control key held down. Now, as you start to drag, you don't necessarily need to be holding down Control, but certainly by the time you get to the destination, you want to be holding down Control, and a tiny little plus accompanies the arrow as a reminder that you are adding, so to speak, data by making a copy of it. So a Control drag, and always let go of the mouse first. Anytime you're using dragging actions with keys, you want to be sure to let go of the mouse first. So that was sometimes called a Control drag. We made a copy of the data. And here too, the formulas up here have been copied down here and adjusted to deal with the data there. A third way to, or a second way, another way to copy data is by dragging with the right mouse button. And this way allows you to copy or move. So if you've got data highlighted and you drag any edge with the right mouse button to a different location, when you let go of the right mouse button, you get a menu. So we could do a move or a copy. So we did a copy. So not necessarily better, but another technique for doing it too. There too, I'll undo that. Now, sometimes when you work with data too, you run into issues where maybe you've got some data in the wrong place. So I've got a worksheet here, and as you look at this closely, you recognize something that's a little bit off. I think almost anybody would agree. I've got sales here in row 4.
got expenses right here, then profits. And then down below, we're tabulating the percentage sales change month by month. But then profits and then expenses. This doesn't line up with the order that we have up above. So what we really want to do, and you can phrase it in different ways, is we want to take this data and put it above profits, put it between sales and profits. And because there's no data to the right, we could either do the entire row or just the cells. I'll do just the cells, but I'm going to move these in one single action. I'm going to drag the top edge, this time with the Shift key held down. Drag these upward, let go of the mouse. We simply move the data upward. Could have done it for the entire row, just did it for the cells. And back on this worksheet here, the one that we were looking at earlier, I want to move the phone column to the left of the Social Security column. So I'll simply drag its, I've clicked column E, I'll drag the left edge here with the Shift key held down, drag it leftward, let go of the mouse first. So you can do entire columns or portions thereof, or entire rows or portions thereof. You can drag multiple columns or rows, you can drag left or right, and so on. So if I want to move these two columns to the right of status, I'll point to any edge, probably the right edge, hold down the Shift key, drag this rightward, let go of the mouse, and so I've moved the data that way. By the way, if you're wondering why these have a funny look to them, they have not been formatted, probably should have been, and they should be typed this way. Now, ideally, what you do when you're using phone or Social Security number, take advantage of the built-in formats here so that you don't have to type the symbols. And why not use the entire column? And then use one of Excel's best shortcuts, activating Format Cells, the Format Cells dialog box. Not all the formatting tools you need are available on the Home tab, although certainly many of them are. Anytime you need to go to Format Cells, you press Ctrl 1, and that activates the Format Cells dialog box. It doesn't always pick the right tab necessarily. It depends upon what you had used the last time you were here, but still, it's close enough. What we want to do here for phone is choose Special, phone number, we can double-click it, and now we've got our data looking like this. It's important to note the parentheses and the space and the dash are not truly in the data. If you double-click here, you don't see them. If you look in the formula bar, you're working with this data, you're not seeing them either. For some reason, my formula bar isn't showing up here. I'm not sure why that is. Must be an odd setting or something. Okay, another example here, Social Security number, same idea. We'll press Control 1. Another way to get to Format Cells too, and we can do it simply by right-clicking the column letter. We'll go right to Format Cells here. And Social Security numbers too, if you use them, don't type the dashes, format them, and it's best to format them almost from the beginning. Special format here, and special category. There's Social Security number. Put it that way. And then double-click to rearrange that column and so on. So that's going to be handy too. Now, data entry, kind of a boring topic maybe, but when you know some shortcuts, it's going to make life a lot simpler if you can put in data faster here.
Hey, Dennis, just want to let you know that the audio is coming through very faint. I don't know if there's any way to adjust that or speak more into the microphone. Just wanted to give you the heads up.
Well, I can switch back to speakerphone again, or not speakerphone, but my actual computer.
My first preference would be to see if we can get the audio working on this, just to not switch, but we've had numerous comments about the volume, so whatever you think is best. If there's a way to correct it, great. If not, then perhaps we go back to Mike. It's up to you.
I've got more control over the mic. Let me try that.
My sound check says it's okay, but can you hear me?
Yes, it does sound fine.
Does that sound better?
It's louder, so I think so, yes.
Okay. Let me do one. I'll make one quick adjustment here. Okay. All right. It's probably fairly well known if you're a regular Excel user, or typical Excel user. You know that anytime you type in a monthly name, and it can be any month, I'll zoom in on this. If you drag from the lower right-hand corner, that's called the fill handle. Drag from the lower right-hand corner, that's next month, next month, next month. No matter which month you start at. Same thing will happen if you drag rightward. Rarely but occasionally you might drag upward. We're always dragging from the lower right-hand corner, the so-called toggle handle. That'll go backward in time. And the same thing would happen if we drag leftward, although typically you don't do that. So I don't need all this. I could do some undos or simply press delete or even drag across the data from the lower right-hand corner to erase it. Anyway, that's fairly well known. You can do the same thing with days of the week. Same idea here too. Often you're dragging downward or rightward. So. And it will repeat, of course, if you drag farther than you need. It also works with abbreviations. It works just fine. And you can start any month you want. Don't ever start with SEPT because that's a 4-letter abbreviation. It's got to be 3 letters. And same thing with days of the week here. Don't ever use TUS as a starting point or THUR. It's got to be 3 letters there. So that works nicely and easily too for creating series. If you wanted to repeat here, if you want August 2 or 3 times here, hold down the Control key as you drag. Let's go with the mouse first, and that allows you to repeat these because if you don't hold down Control, they simply grow or move ahead chronologically to the next month. Now when it comes to numbers, that's a surprise sometimes. I can put in any number. Here's a 1. If I drag this from the lower right-hand corner, what happens? It stays the same. But if you want it to grow or change by 1, hold down Control. Now put in any other number, the same general thing happens. If I put in a 12, a simple drag just keeps it the same. But if I hold down the Control key, it's going to increment these by 1. Again, you like to go with the mouse first. I'm holding down Control, here you go with the mouse. Now, if people have been writing this down, they say, wait a minute here. Over here you said you hold down Control to make these stay the same, right? Right. With numbers, you hold down Control to make them change. So it's kind of like, what is this, the rule of opposites here or something? Well, that's just the way it is. And when you are dragging, depending upon the nature of the data, there will be times when you'll hold down Control, other times not, and sometimes the meaning will be the opposite, which is pretty annoying at times, let's face it. If you want to create a number series, I've got a 5, I've got a 10, and then I want 15, 20, etc. Highlight both of them, drag from the lower right-hand corner. Excel sees the interval and then repeats it. If that list had been down here and I happen to drag upward, it's going to go to 0 and -5, and so on. And we can do that same kind of thing with this kind of data, although less likely. So for example here, if I just want every other month, January, what do I put in MAR right there? Highlight both of these, and maybe just to avoid confusion, get rid of this first. But highlight both of those. That's a 2-month interval. Drag down here. It's going to be every other month, and so on. Unlikely to use it in that way. Now, entering dates and times, something we do frequently, perhaps in the course of the day. How often do you put in today's date? Some people do it frequently. I'm going to just delete the data from here, but put in today's date. Don't type it anymore. Press Control semicolon. It's fast, it's easy, and you just save yourself some typing. That entry will not change. It's just a shortcut for typing. You want to put in the current time. It's Control Shift semicolon. Control Shift semicolon. I'm in the Mountain Time Zone. That's why we're seeing it this way. Now, neither of those will change. If you do want them to change, you use a function called today, T-O-D-A-Y. You can type it equal T-O-D-A-Y, left parenthesis, enter. For the moment, it looks the same, but this will change as you open and close and save a file over time. Every day you open it, this gets changed. It is the answer to the question, too, that people sometimes have. Why is it with certain files, I might open the file, just look at it, and then close it, and I get a prompt, do you want to save your changes? I didn't change anything. If you have one of these functions in a workbook, it makes a change every time you open the workbook. And if you want the current date and time, another function you could use is equal NOW. This too is dynamic. It will change. Equal NOW, left parenthesis. And that might or might not display the way you want it to. If you go into Format Cells, remember Control 1, we can get there under Date Time. You do have an option in here for putting in the date and time, either in 24-hour style or AM/PM style. So you could do that too. Now, in a minute or so, we might check back here. That time will have changed. We're not going to worry about that, but that's going to happen too. Another quick thought on series, if you type 1 in Q, almost any combination, if you drag a series like that, I'm going to drag it downward. It only cycles through the numbers 1 through 4. By the way, that's now 1238. You saw a change there. You don't keep an eye on that, of course. And by the way, with this series with Q, you can also use QTR, space 1, you can do that, or 1 QTR, I meant to show a different variation, but you can do that too, and also with quarter 1. These work the same downward and rightward, so one variation here, I'll just go a different direction, 1 space Q, UAR. So if that were the entry here, fine, I'll drag it rightward, it's going to be second quarter, and so on. Anyway, some changes you can do there, make there. So putting in data quickly and efficiently, some nice shortcuts. And here's one you wouldn't expect. I happen to want a list here of just weekdays. Now I've got data below it, but I'm going to wipe it out. But this time I'm going to drag this entry with the right mouse button. I'm dragging it all the way down here. And what I want is a list of weekdays from now until, I'm not sure, next few weeks or so. So I drag it with the right mouse button, and when I let go of that list, here's a menu. And one of the choices is fill weekdays. So what do we have here? There's Friday, and then no Sunday, Monday, and then, or no Saturday, Sunday, and then we have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, again a gap, and so on. So that's handy too. You can also create a nice series here by creating, copying months, and you could have a series of months. So if you do end of month accounting, maybe that's the 31st of August. If we drag this list downward with the right mouse button and then fill months, I'll link back to here, fill months, we're going to get the last day of every month because the first day happens to be the last day of the month. And the interval here is not the same, of course. That's a 31-day interval, that's a 30-day interval, and that's a 28-day, or a 31-day interval, and that's a 28-day interval, and so on. So you get the idea on these too. So it's good, quick ways to create lists quickly. All right, some formula tips. How can we talk about Excel and not talk about formulas? It pops up all the time. So here's a worksheet here, and you might have seen this if you've attended other webinars on formulas, formula shortcuts. We're looking at a worksheet here. We're trying to figure out what's going on. It sure would be helpful if we could see the formulas. I'm going to press Ctrl tilde. And some of you might be saying, what is tilde? I'll press it again. Look what happens. First of all, what did happen? All column widths got doubled. Wherever there are formulas, we see them. I'll press Ctrl tilde again. We're back to normal. Tilde, here it is. I put it here in the special key so you can see a little bit better, and I'll zoom way in on it. In the upper left corner of most keyboards, you will see this key. The top symbol is usually called tilde. It's that symbol that appears above the letter N in Spanish and above certain vowels in Portuguese and so on. The symbol below it is usually called accent grave, but half the time people don't use that either. It doesn't have a good name. Let's face it that way, or put it that way. So at any time in any worksheet, if you want to see the formulas, Control tilde is what you press. No shift key involved. No shift key. Now it doubles the width of columns to give you a better opportunity to see most formulas. Formulas tend to be longer than the results, so that's why this happens. You still can't see all the formula in D13, although you can see most of it. So Control tilde. Before doing it too, it's not a bad thought here in some cases. Print this after maybe further adjusting the column widths. Print this to serve as a source of documentation. Control tilde again, we're back to normal. This is the same as the command that you'll find on the Formulas tab in the ribbon off to the right, Show Formulas. And the keystroke shortcut that they refer to below this under the pop-up tip, it says Show Formulas, they refer to the other symbol, and so it's really, really tiny. You can barely see it. Control plus whatever the accent is called, accent grave for French. So anyway, that's the technique. Control tilde, whatever you want to call that key. No shift key as you do this. Control tilde, back and forth. I use it a lot when I'm looking at worksheets I'm not familiar with. It helps me begin to absorb what's going on and figure things out. A companion to this, but completely different, begins with, first of all, making the active cell be in one cell only. It doesn't make any difference which cell, but just one cell. Go to the Home tab, far right button, find and select Formulas. It highlights all the formula cells. So in any worksheet at any time, if you want to know where the formulas are, click on single cell first, go to Home, then far right button, find and select, and then Formulas. I often will make them yellow or blue or something, some background color here on the fill color bucket on the Home tab. So I know at a glance, at least for a while, the formulas are. This isn't dynamic, so if I click here and delete the content, that stays yellow. or if I write a new formula here, it does not turn yellow. So periodically you want to run the feature again. Now, in some worksheets, it's going to be handy to know some things without necessarily writing formulas. So for example, you're looking at this worksheet here and you say, I wonder what this company is spending on salaries. So you click column J, and you can see it right here in the status bar at the bottom of the screen. And not only can you see the total, you might also be seeing the maximum, the minimum, a count of how many numbers there are, and an average. Now, these might not be here, or maybe you're seeing only a few of them. You want to right-click in the status bar, and you'll see a ton of check marks, but the section right here, these 6, are the ones you want to consider checking or unchecking. And my thought is, why not leave them all checked? You will see this data at the bottom of the screen anytime you highlight 2 or more cells. So I'm going to highlight these 2, and we see totals. That wouldn't be very valuable, but on the other hand, it just illustrates the concept. What's the average job rating here? It's 3.2. 5 is great and 1 is terrible. It's 3.2. Years of service in this organization. I click column H, years of service here. The average years of service is 11 3/4, a little bit above that, so you have a sense of what's going on here. Even an average hire date is going to work. Average hire date, the most recent hire date was in March here. The oldest goes back to 93, and the average was 2002, so we get some sense of the data that way too. That's really handy at times. Now, what if you actually wanted to put in a formula here? I'm going to zoom way in so we can see salary, but also out here in column O, what if I wanted to calculate the total salary here? Because I want it on the screen all the time. I could type equal sum, nothing wrong with that, but AutoSum is right here. It's on the Home tab. Recognize it's also on the Formulas tab. We could start by clicking that, or maybe even faster, Alt equal. That activates AutoSum. Now, AutoSum makes a guess, here a bad guess, but rather than highlighting all that data in column J, which is what I really want to hide, really want to add up, I'm not going to start dragging from J2 downward. I could type it if I knew the address, but it's going to be a lot faster to just click column J. And that's it. We're done. That notation style might be new to you, but it has 2 advantages. One is it's easy to read once you get used to it. And the second is that, and even better, is if this list grows or shrinks, we don't have to adjust the formula. Now, of course, you've got to know your data well enough to know there are no total lines in there, there are no interim subtotal formulas or anything like that. But let's say this is going to add up all the data in column J. And as we add new rows here, we don't have to adjust this at all. It's a great tool. Now, I meant to have these off to the side a little bit just thinking now, but actually I'll put this here for reference. I want an average here. How about an average? Let's do this a little bit faster than you might think too. We could type equal average, and by the way, you can't type equal AVG, but we could type equal average to start that function, but also AutoSum in both of its locations has an accompanying arrow. So click the arrow and choose average, and then redirect this to column J, and enter. So there we are. Again, it looks kind of funny at first if you're not used to it, but use entire columns where appropriate. And you can use these in VLOOKUPs and in other functions as well too. It'll work. Now here I might want to do a median. That's another function, and a lot of you know what that means, of course. There's no real shortcut for this, but I do want to point out when you type function names, and I've done this already, you don't need to capitalize them. And once you know what you're going to do, in this case we're going to click column J, you do not have to put in the right parentheses if you're only using a single function. Anytime you're using nesting, or depending on how you're using them is actually the better way to say it, but if you've got functions within functions, yes, you must type all the relevant parentheses. But when using them only one at a time, I'm just going to press enter. And that saves a second, half second, or so, whatever, at different times when you're typing formulas. That's handy. Okay, we want to put in a new salary right here, and we're going to use, for everybody, this % increase. There are 2 or 3 ways we could write the formula. I'm going to simply create it by typing or putting in J2 asterisk this amount plus this. Now, others of you might use parentheses, but there's no question, no matter how you write this formula, it's going to involve J2 and M1. The problem, of course, is no matter how you've written this, as soon as you start to drag this downward, if you haven't made any special adjustments, you recognize that there's only going to be one person happy about this pay raise, and that's the first person there. Because what happens is the J2 references properly become J3 and J4, but the M1 reference starts drifting downward. And so I'm sure a number of you have seen this. What we need to do is to make sure that the M1 reference is absolute. So either just after having typed it, or if you come back later, you can click behind it, in front of it, in the middle of it, or highlight it. Doesn't make any difference as long as you're nearby. Press the function key F4. It makes this an absolute address. And now I want to make another point here too. Suppose I didn't have the data done and I just made the change here, or just done all this. If I press enter, the active cell moves down to L3, and then I've got to reposition it again. It's only half second or so, but I want the active cell to stay in place because I'm ready to copy. So I won't press enter, I'll press Ctrl enter. Just does not move the active cell and completes the formula. Now I want to copy this down the column. I can certainly drag from the lower right-hand corner. That's going to be a lot faster than copy-paste or anything. But double-clicking the lower right-hand corner is by far the best, and one of Excel's best shortcuts. We've got 700 rows here. I don't want to drag this downward. I want to double-click. There it is. And right away, I think the question entering your mind would be, how far did this get copied? Well, let's find out. Not by scrolling, but by pressing Control period. Went down to row 742. That's the bottom of my list. There it is. Control period simply moves the active cell around the corners of a selected range. And in this case, by copying the formula, we are also selecting the range. And we would want to know. If you're using Excel 2007, by the way, this would not work as smoothly if you had an empty cell over here in column K before you got to the bottom. In Excel 2007, if this were empty, for example, and I'll backtrack a little bit, undo, there we go. If this is empty, if we were using Excel 2007, we'd double-click and it would only go to here. But from 2010 onward, Excel looks at the entire list to the left there, sees that this is part of it, and ignores that empty cell. So a slight adjustment you might need to make there. But that's certainly one of Excel's best shortcuts. And you can copy data, or in other words, it could be pure numbers or text downward this way too, or simply in formulas where it's most valuable, double-click. I'll do it from here. It's going to work the same way. Control period just to check it out. Yep, there it is. Control period back up top. If you ever see this keystroke shortcut described in a vacuum, it seems kind of ridiculous. What does Control period do? It moves the active cell around the corners of a range. Now, would you ever want to do that? Highly unlikely. Maybe there might be a case, but I doubt it. Not much. It was certainly handy, though, in this example. Now, some of us work with charts, some of us don't. Some people don't because they've heard that it's intimidating because there's so many features. That's certainly true. But on the other hand, there are some really fast things we can do in order to create a chart. If we wanted to create a chart of this data, first of all, it's usually a good idea not to include totals along with details, because there's a number 805, but in the details there's a 40. If we had columns of proportional height there, that's going to get way out of whack. So often when we create charts, we do include adjacent labels above and to the left usually, and don't include totals most of the time. If we'd like to have a chart on a separate sheet, it's F11. There it is, in no time at all. If you prefer to have the chart on the same sheet here, I want to go. I clicked on the wrong sheet there. I meant to point out the chart is one sheet to the right, one sheet to the left of your source data. So here's the source data. We pressed F11. Now, if you'd like to have the chart right on the worksheet, you've got your data highlighted. It's Alt F1. Alt F1. And that's really handy at times. A quick look there and you might proceed. When you're moving the chart around, it's best to either drag the border or slightly faster, just drag right inside the border. Don't click in the middle of the chart and start dragging, because you'll be moving portions in the inner part of the chart, which you probably didn't want. So drag just inside the corner or any of the edges. Usually up top would work best. A slight adjustment here. When you're moving this, or you can resize it, of course, any way you want. You can make it wide, make it tall, and so on. But when you are doing this, if you want to make sure that the edges of the chart line up with the cell boundaries, hold down the Alt key. And that forces like a magnetic attraction to make sure those edges line up with cell boundaries. You don't see it too clearly until you click outside of the chart. And usually it's best to do this on opposite corners because you're taking care of two edges at once. So if you're not holding down Alt, these can go anywhere. If you do hold down Alt, then it's going to line up with those cell boundaries. And again, I'm sort of half joking about this because, I mean, is it that important really? Well, it could be. I'm going to let go of the mouse first to do that. Sometimes you care, sometimes you don't. That's going to be handy at times. And here's an oddity about charts you want to be on top of. If you have years, and it seems to happen only with those, and I'm not quite sure why, if you have years in a chart, like this one, and if you click in here to create a chart, and by the way, if this is surrounded by empty cells, and it is, if we click here and create a chart, Excel somehow will use this data inappropriately as if it were part of the data that we see below. So I'm going to press Alt F1 here. And no matter how you create a chart, it's going to happen. And that at first looks good, but in closer inspection, it's not very good at all because this column here represents the value 2008. Now this list here, almost the same with the obvious difference of nothing in the upper left-hand corner. I'm going to press Alt F1, and there's a chart that is correct. So when you're working with years, be careful with those. It seems not to work or be a problem with any other time frame, just this one here. So I wish we had time for more tips. We could do just a couple quick ones here. On the empty sheet that I created earlier, maybe I'm going to create a new list, and I'm going to put in name here. And here I want to put in 2014 salary, but I'd like to have the word salary underneath 2014 in the same cell, so I'll press Alt-Enter and then salary. And over here, I want to put in the 2014 tax code, so 2014, Alt-Enter, and then tax, Alt-Enter, and then code. That's going to be a narrow column, so I want the label to not be very wide. So whoops, no, I forgot. I meant to, after tax, I meant to press Alt-Enter. There we go. Do this again. We'll start over. So, 2014, Alt-Enter, tax, Alt-Enter, and code. There we go. So you can stack it on multiple times. Probably what you do here too is align these on the top or middle maybe. But Alt-Enter introduces a line break, and so that's fast and easy too. And by the way, if I wanted to copy some data, here's a little shortcut too that comes in handy at times. If I don't want to copy data for the ADC group, I'm going to just hide these rows momentarily. I'll do a quick click and hide here. And maybe I don't want to copy the phone and Social Security either, so I'll right click there and hide that data. What if I wanted to copy some of the rest of this just for the admin training group? So as I select this data here, I've got hidden data in the background. So I just want to copy this much here. So I press Ctrl C. I jump over to the other worksheet and paste. And I know it doesn't match up with that data. That's okay. But I'm doing a Ctrl V paste. I'm getting all that other stuff as well, including the data from the ADC group and all that. Let me zoom back. So when you copy data, if you've got hidden columns and rows, if it's outside of a filter, that is, you're going to get all the data unless you take a certain step. So I'm going to go back here. I'd like to copy all this, but not the hidden data. So how do we pick up just the visible data? It's Alt semicolon. Well, that's logical. Alt semicolon. Then we'll press Control C to copy, jump over to the other sheet there, and I'll paste it right below here, Control V. There we are. That way. So that selects the visible cells only. If you didn't know that shortcut, you'd be hard-pressed to find the command. It's buried deep in the menu system. Home tab, far right, find and select, go to special, visible cells only. But the keystroke shortcut is Alt semicolon. By the way, one other keystroke shortcut, and for the moment we don't need it out of context, anytime you copy, if you later need to get to paste special somewhere, it's Control Alt V. Ctrl Alt V activates the Paste Special dialog box. One more shortcut here. New in Excel 2013, you cannot do this in other versions in quite the same way. Great tool here. I need to rearrange this data here. I want this to be set up for, I'll actually do this for column E. I can't sort my list alphabetically. So over here I'm going to type Baker, comma space Mark. And then below this I'm going to type H for Hanson. And Excel sees what I'm doing. All I do is press enter and I get a list just the way I want it. And over here in column H, I want that list like I see in column G, but I want all the letters capitalized. So I type 9, capital C, and then that's a 0, and then a capital K, and then 904. And now I'll type 3. Excel sees what I'm doing. Enter. All done. That's all the time we have. I'll take it back to Scott. We might have time for questions, or a question or two maybe.
Yeah, we can run a little bit over for those that are able to stick around, but what I'd like to do now is launch the remaining polls just to make sure that we have ample opportunity to get our responses in, and this is a straightforward question. Please get your response in quickly. I'm not going to leave this open very long. We have one more left to go, and all this is helpful so that Dennis can take a moment to look through the questions that have accumulated throughout, see if there are some that he may want to circle back and revisit. And I believe the answer here is VLOOKUP. That's certainly what the audience's favorite response was, and that's what I understand to be the response too. And let me go ahead and do one remaining question. This is, again, the first time we've offered this particular class on our platform. It's very helpful for us to get feedback from you, and when we what we're going to do following the webinar is make sure that everyone fills out the evaluation, and hopefully we'll get your written responses, be able to post testimonials to the site, and also get your feedback on that can be helpful for future classes. This class is only slotted for an hour or shortest of the Excel classes that we offer. Your feedback would be appreciated in any regard regarding length of class, content that was covered, etc. We have our votes in here, and very positive results. That's exactly what I like to see. That's wonderful. Let me go ahead and close that. And I do, Dennis, in addition, put something up on the screen. I had asked you guys in advance, knowing how valuable Excel is to our members, if you could provide us with a discount for future services, knowing that there are many firms out there who don't have an internal expert like yourself, Dennis, with the same, with 25 years of experience. So I was hoping you could share with us a little bit about how you generally work with the CPA community. I put the discounts up on the screen for people to view, but can you walk us through what a typical engagement might look like?
Well, possibly an on-site training session, and not, I want to call it a class, but and that's not wrong. But at the same time, what if you say, I need to know about formulas, I need to know about pivot tables, I need to know about conditional formatting, and a few other things. A customized class is what you need. A so-called generic session that's called beginner, intermediate, advanced, and you can see those all over the place, aren't necessarily bad, but a lot of times they're covering topics that you don't need. It's going to work a lot better if you could have a customized class based on your topics. And furthermore, the huge advantage there is, what if the instructor, and it would be me, is working with your data? In other words, not generic data. That's always the downside of public training, and the examples have to be generic. We can't suit our general audience out there. But if it's just you within your company, you and your colleagues, and we're working with your data, it's almost like a workshop, and it's much, much more efficient that way too. And so if you think of courses as being the schedule, or the agenda is set up based more on the topics you need as opposed to topics that you don't necessarily use, that's going to be much more helpful. Also, of course, in a live session, there's a real person there answering questions back and forth. And there are tons of little things that have been bothering you about Excel off and on, little nagging things that you just can't get done quickly. And those are likely to come out in public session too. So that's a huge advantage. again, I'm not putting down webinars because they certainly have a role to play too, and I do lots of them. And but the different training methods, different methods of delivering education, computer education, are definitely you want to get the right mix, and certainly live training is always going to be one of those that's out there, a good strong feature, and I love doing it too. I love the human interaction.
And I'll mention, Dennis, too, that for many of us, we want to become as proficient as possible with Excel and the functions that we normally do, but you get to a point where there are so many features that are out there, again, over 450, that it's basically impossible to know what's available, and just having an idea of what's possible is often enough to want to take next steps without trying to learn the programming yourself. I say that because I had my own specific needs of things that I realized could be automated, and I was able to get into a consulting agreement and with Excel and Access LLC, and had things automated very quickly, things that would have taken me much longer to learn. It was just a matter of being aware of what options were out there before I knew exactly how to engage a firm. So however today benefited you, whether it was simple tips and tricks that you can use going forward, whether it's whet your appetite for additional education, in which case you have multiple options. We presented them here on the screen. We wanted to make sure we gave you all great discounts, something that would be very enticing for you. There are a couple of books on the screen that were written specifically for CPAs that I think will be of interest to you, and then, of course, some other options listed here as well. And so if you download the PowerPoint presentation, you'll be able to find this download, which also has a link to the Excel workbook that was used. We're also going to load this session up to our site. It will be up there by the end of the day. The Excel classes that we've archived and posted to our site have far and away been the most viewed sessions that we have offered, I think, because it just applies to all of us, whether you're in public practice industry or in business for yourself or anything. I don't mean to exclude anybody, but that's generally who uses our site. But we have found that we've reached a brand new audience with these courses, and we just want to encourage you to please tell your friends and colleagues about the classes. They can view them for free, every single one of them that we offer, and it's because of the word of mouth that we have hit pretty much record registrations every time we've offered these classes. This particular session sold out 1,300 people in less than 24 hours, to give you a sense. So, Dennis, I want to thank you for everything that you have done to contribute content to our site. Are there any other things you want to circle back on? I don't know if there were too specific.
I want to remind people of a phone number, too, if they want to contact us. It's 877-392-3539.
You bet, and that's up on the screen too with Chris's contact info and email address, and yeah, same likewise. I hope everyone's able to do what they need to with the content, and hopefully you'll be able to take advantage of additional resources. So if you have specific questions, contact information has been provided, and it sounds like, Dennis, we're going to wrap it up, or is there anything else you wanted to mention?
I want to thank everybody for watching, and again, if you have thoughts about additional training, you know where to go, and I'd love to be able to visit your site and do live training. Yesterday I was in Austin, Texas doing something for some clients, and I think an occasional class, I think everybody should have at least one live session of Excel, every year. You need a refresher. New things have happened too along the way, new techniques.
Dennis, actually, I hope I don't take you off subject, but what about Access? Is that something that you're involved with too, or is that a different?
I personally am not involved in Access. I used to be involved in teaching it, not as heavily as I do Excel, but Excel is used by everybody. Access is a little more difficult, and so on, and others can speak to that better than I can. But it's a great tool. There's no question about it, and needed in some cases too.
Okay. All right, well, we're going to end it with that, and I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend, and we hope to have you back on Monday. We have a full calendar next week, very strong sessions that are taking place, and we certainly hope you're going to be a part of them. So thank you, everyone. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.